It began with a whisper that didn't belong in her kitchen. Elena Moreau stood by the sink, her phone buzzing against the counter, and in the next room, Marcus Hale's low voice slid through laughter that wasn't meant for her ears. "It's just Clara," he said when she stepped in, smiling with the ease of a man too comfortable with deception. But Elena felt the tremor beneath the charm, the kind that hides panic behind practiced calm. That night, as the house exhaled its quiet, she replayed every recent conversation. The new password, the sudden overtime, the lingering scent of another perfume. Something in his tone had shifted, like a key turned half in a lock. She didn't know what she was looking for yet, only that it was already looking back. When Marcus Hale pulled her into a hug later that night, his voice melted into apology. "You overthink things, Lena. You always have." But Elena Moreau could hear the calculations stitched beneath the softness. He spoke like a man rehearsing tenderness, touching her face as if to erase the thought itself. The silence after his words was heavier than the lie, his heartbeat steady, his breathing too measured. She smiled back, but it wasn't forgiveness. It was surveillance. Inside her, the first quiet rebellion formed, the decision to remember every word, every shift in tone. He called it love. She called it evidence. At 2:13 a.m., the screen glow painted Elena Moreau's face like confession light. She scrolled, every swipe a bruise across trust. Messages to Clara, casual, harmless at first. But the rhythm told another story. Too many late-night exchanges, too many jokes typed twice. One message caught her eye. "Wish you were here," sent at 11:48, just after she'd gone to bed. Her chest tightened, breath short. Marcus Hale slept beside her, unaware that the truth was unraveling inches from his hand. She didn't cry, she archived. Love wasn't dying, it was documenting its own murder. The name, Clara, appeared again, always with a heart, sometimes with silence that said more than words. Elena Moreau sat in the dim kitchen, phone trembling in her hand as she replayed their conversations in her head. Marcus Hale's charm had always been his weapon. He could make guilt sound like affection, deceit like devotion. She closed her eyes, recalling the way he used to say her name. Soft, deliberate, reverent. Reverent. Now it sounded mechanical, recycled, the same cadence he gave to Clara. It wasn't heartbreak she felt. It was awakening, a quiet, dangerous kind of clarity. The voice message arrived just before dawn. No name, no preview. Just a waveform pulsing like a heartbeat. Elena Moreau hesitated, thumb hovering, every instinct screaming not to press play. But she did. The voice was Clara Voss. Soft, intimate, careless with boundaries. "I miss you," it whispered. The tone was laughter wrapped in guilt, affection laced with ownership. Marcus Hale's faint chuckle echoed in the background, unmistakable. The message lasted 12 seconds, but it stretched through her entire chest like eternity. For the first time, the house didn't feel like theirs. It felt like a stage for betrayal, waiting for its next line. The sound of Clara Voss's voice haunted the walls long after the message stopped playing. Elena Moreau sat motionless, her phone still glowing in her palm, as Marcus Hale stirred awake in the next room. Every tone, every breath replayed in her mind, those soft syllables that once belonged only to her. She didn't confront him immediately. She wanted him to speak first, to hang himself with the same words he'd used to bind her trust. When Marcus appeared in the doorway, shirt half-buttoned, eyes heavy with morning lies, she simply said, "Who's Clara to you, really?" The silence that followed was thick, living, a third presence in the room. The denial came rehearsed, fluent, dripping with disbelief. "Elena, it's not what you think," Marcus Hale said, voice steady enough to sound innocent. But Elena Moreau had learned that the most convincing liars never raise their voices, they lower them. He spoke of work, collaboration, deadlines, as though infidelity could be scheduled between blueprints and meetings. Yet his eyes flickered when she said the word voice. The way he froze. Half-second. Barely perceptible. Was confession enough? She realized he wasn't shocked she'd heard it. He was shocked she'd survived it without breaking. That's when fear replaced heartbreak. "You always twist things," Marcus Hale murmured, walking closer, hands open in mock surrender. Gaslighting dripped like honey. Sweet, slow, suffocating. "You hear one thing and build a story around it." Elena Moreau almost laughed at the irony. How he could stand before her and weaponize calmness. His presence filled the room like fog, soft, heavy, disorienting. He reached for her, but she stepped back, not in anger, but in awakening. She had been living inside a story he wrote, one line at a time. And now, for the first time, she realized she could end it without permission. When Elena Moreau replayed the voice message, she heard things she'd missed before. Breaths, background sounds, the clink of glass, laughter close enough to taste. Clara Voss's tone wasn't casual. It was claim. "I can still smell you on me." The voice giggled faintly. Elena froze. There it was. The kind of intimacy that left no room for misunderstanding. She set the phone down like it was burning. Her reflection in the dark screen didn't look like a woman betrayed. It looked like someone studying a crime scene, piecing together motive, timeline, and truth. The heartbreak was over. The investigation had begun. By nightfall, the silence between them had become an entity of its own, thick, coiled, waiting to strike. Marcus Hale lingered in the living room, nursing a glass of whiskey he didn't finish, while Elena Moreau stayed in the bedroom doorway, eyes dry, mind louder than his excuses. He said nothing now because he knew words would only sharpen her clarity. Every tick of the clock marked distance, one heartbeat further from the man she thought she knew. When she finally spoke, her voice was even, almost kind. "You can stop lying now, Marcus. The recording already told me everything." Dinner was supposed to be reconciliation, but Elena Moreau arrived armed with silence sharper than accusation. Marcus Hale had chosen a quiet restaurant, the same one they'd celebrated anniversaries in. The irony lost only on him. Candlelight flickered over wine glasses, disguising her restraint as grace. "You've been distant," he said. Voice syrup smooth. Elena smiled. "I've been listening." He didn't understand at first, not until she placed her phone on the table, screen dark but heavy with memory. The moment stretched, his pulse visible in his jaw, her eyes unreadable. The waiter poured wine, unaware he'd just witnessed the beginning of a war, disguised as conversation. "You're making me the villain again," Marcus Hale whispered, his voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. Elena Moreau watched him perform, his eyes glassy, his tone balancing between remorse and manipulation. He spoke of misunderstanding, of pressure, of how Clara Voss had been. Just someone who listened. But Elena had stopped believing in his confessions. They all came too easily, too perfectly timed. He wasn't trying to heal her trust. He was auditioning for forgiveness. "I'm not the villain, Marcus," she said softly. "You just wrote me out of the story." His face fell, not from guilt, but from losing control of the narrative. The next evening, their friends gathered, unaware of the fracture beneath the laughter. Elena Moreau watched Marcus Hale play the charming partner, effortless in his deceit. He touched her shoulder, refilled her glass, smiled on cue. Every gesture was performance, and she knew it. Later, when someone mentioned Clara Voss's name, Marcus's smile faltered for the first time. The table went quiet for half a second, but it was enough. Elena held his gaze, long and deliberate, until he looked away. That was her proof, not in words or messages, but in the flinch of a liar cornered by truth disguised as coincidence. The argument began before dessert, ended. Marcus Hale's tone sharpened, slicing through pretense. "You're humiliating me," he hissed. Elena Moreau didn't flinch. She had already learned that control screams loudest when it's slipping. Just as his anger peaked, his phone rang, her name flashing across the screen. Clara Voss. Time froze. The sound of her ringtone, the intimacy of it, filled the silence like confession. Marcus snatched the phone, fumbling to mute it, but the damage was irreversible. The table watched. His facade cracked open, spilling truth like wine. For the first time, Elena smiled. Small, quiet, victorious. Outside, the night was rain-polished and quiet. Elena Moreau walked ahead, her heels striking pavement with steady rhythm, while Marcus Hale followed, calling her name like a plea. "You don't understand what she means," he shouted, desperation unraveling in the dark. Elena stopped beneath a streetlight, the rain softening around her. "No, Marcus," she said without turning. "I finally do." She didn't look back as she walked away, her figure dissolving into the amber haze of street reflections. Behind her, his voice broke, not from love, but from the realization that his silence had finally lost its audience. The morning after she walked away, Elena Moreau began her quiet hunt for the truth. It wasn't revenge that drove her. It was precision. She opened his laptop, fingers steady, eyes empty. Password: Clara22. The arrogance of it almost made her laugh. Folders, receipts, hotel confirmations, all neatly archived like trophies of deceit. Every email was a confession wrapped in polite professionalism. She saved everything. Every document, every date. Love had turned into data, intimacy into evidence. And as the files stacked on her screen, she realized something devastating. He hadn't been careless. He had been confident she'd never look. By evening, Marcus Hale sensed it. Something in Elena Moreau's silence had changed. She wasn't hurt anymore. She was collecting. He checked his phone obsessively, deleting messages, clearing call logs. But guilt leaves fingerprints even when erased. He told himself he could control it. That charm could still rewrite the story. Yet paranoia settled behind his eyes like smoke. He began speaking to her too kindly, complimenting too quickly, performing sincerity with trembling hands. He thought he was repairing trust. She knew he was rehearsing panic. Meanwhile, Clara Voss began to leave digital breadcrumbs. A photo at a hotel bar, a shadow familiar in the background, a caption that read, "Some things are worth the risk." Elena Moreau saw it hours later, her chest tightening, not from surprise, but from confirmation. She took a screenshot and archived it in a folder named Truth. The internet had become her courtroom, and Clara's carelessness was her confession. The story was unraveling without confrontation, driven by ego and algorithms. For the first time, Elena smiled, not in relief, but in understanding how quietly power returns to those who stop asking for honesty. Late that night, Elena Moreau sat in her car outside Marcus Hale's office. She watched the building's dark windows, waiting, when his figure appeared. Coat slung over one arm, phone at his ear. Her pulse didn't quicken. It slowed. He wasn't her heartbreak anymore. He was her evidence. The distance between them wasn't love. It was observation. He laughed softly at something Clara Voss said on the other end, unaware that his echoing voice now belonged to her archive too. The engine idled. The recording app blinked red. Trust had become surveillance, and love had evolved into strategy. Or evolved into strategy. When Elena Moreau pressed record that night, she didn't speak with anger. Her voice was measured, deliberate. A confession turned inside out. "You said she was just a friend," she began. Words calm as firelight. Now you'll hear how lies sound when played back. The message wasn't meant for apology. It was her control reclaiming shape. She ended the recording, labeled it for Marcus, and hit send. Then she closed her laptop, turned off her phone, and let the silence devour the night. Somewhere across the city, his world began to fracture. 12 seconds of truth looping on repeat. The message reached Marcus Hale at 3:07 a.m. 12 seconds that shredded 4 years of lies. He replayed it again and again. Each repetition, duller, heavier, more suffocating. Elena Moreau's voice was calm, almost surgical, leaving no space for denial. When he called her, the line went unanswered. Panic settled in his chest like static. He wasn't afraid of losing her. He was terrified of exposure. Because now someone else had heard it too. Clara Voss. The silence between all three of them had become a triangle of consequence. And for the first time, Marcus realized he was no longer the storyteller. He was the subject. The morning after, Elena Moreau watched the city wake without him. Messages flooded in, calls from unknown numbers, his name lighting up her screen, each one unanswered. Then, at noon, the first crack. Clara Voss had shared the audio with a friend, who sent it to another until it reached Marcus Hale's colleagues. Whispers spread faster than truth ever could. He showed up at Elena's door, pale and shaking, eyes pleading for silence. "You've ruined me," he said. She met his gaze, unflinching. "No, Marcus, you did that yourself. I just pressed play." By evening, Clara Voss had disappeared. Her profile's gone, her number unreachable. The digital traces she'd once flaunted had been scrubbed clean. Elena Moreau scrolled through the emptiness, the silence of a woman who realized too late she was disposable. There was no triumph in it, only recognition. They had both been played by the same script, the same man who mistook deception for charm. Somewhere, Clara was grieving a lie that had worn a different face. Somewhere, Elena was realizing that empathy and revenge often shared the same rhythm. Slow, steady, inevitable. Marcus Hale tried to rewrite the story. He told friends Elena Moreau had exaggerated, that Clara Voss had misled them both. But lies lose their flavor when everyone knows the ending. His colleagues stopped returning calls. His clients rescheduled indefinitely. Even his reflection looked foreign now. A man stripped of charm, rehearsing honesty for no audience. He stared at the phone, thumb hovering over her name, but he didn't dial. The real punishment wasn't isolation. It was remembering the sound of Elena's voice, controlled, calm, final. A tone had never mastered, because truth doesn't tremble. Elena Moreau didn't block Marcus Hale. She simply stopped responding. Her silence became the boundary he could never cross again. At night, she walked along the river where they used to meet, her reflection fractured in the current. Peace didn't arrive suddenly. It seeped in, like dawn. She had spent years waiting for him to speak the truth. Now she realized she no longer needed to hear it. The voice message still lived in her phone, untouched, not as proof, as closure. Because sometimes, the most powerful confession isn't the one you record, it's the one you delete. The story spread like smoke, quiet at first, then everywhere. Marcus Hale's name surfaced in whispered circles, each retelling sharper than the last. The recording became urban folklore, the architect who built a life on lies until the foundation cracked. Elena Moreau avoided the noise, but it followed her in fragments, at cafes, in inboxes, through sympathetic smiles that felt like surveillance. She never defended herself. She didn't need to. The truth had already spoken, looping in 1,000 versions across the city. What once was heartbreak had turned into mythology, and Marcus, the man who once owned the narrative, had become its ghost. At the firm, whispers grew louder than his blueprints. Marcus Hale walked past desks that once turned toward him. Now, they avoided his eyes. His charm, his greatest weapon, had lost its grip. The meetings became fewer, the calls shorter. One afternoon, he caught his own reflection in the mirrored lobby and saw it, the first hint of fear behind the familiar smile. That's what Elena Moreau had taken from him. Not reputation, but control. He wasn't angry anymore. He was unraveling. Guilt had made a home in his silence, and for the first time, he couldn't talk his way out. Elena Moreau rebuilt quietly. She moved apartments, changed her number, and let time file away the fragments of what once defined her. Healing didn't look cinematic. It looked like grocery lists, unread texts, and learning to sleep without replaying evidence. Yet sometimes, late at night, she'd scroll past old photos and pause, not in longing but in disbelief. How something so cruel could once feel so beautiful. She realized then that closure isn't justice, it's distance. And in that distance, she finally saw herself again, unedited, unobserved, entirely her own. Then, weeks later, Clara Voss resurfaced. A quiet post. No captions, no tags, just an ultrasound image and the sound of rain outside her window. The world gasped, but Elena Moreau didn't. She stared at the screen for a long moment, her pulse steady, expression unreadable. Marcus Hale's name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't have to be. Some truths announced themselves in silence. The city buzzed with speculation, but Elena simply powered off her phone. The chaos didn't belong to her anymore. What once consumed her now passed through her like a storm she had already survived. That night, Elena Moreau replayed the old voice message one last time, not to relive it, but to remind herself of what she'd escaped. Clara Voss's laughter, Marcus Hale's whisper, it all sounded smaller now, almost pitiful. She deleted it mid-sentence, her thumbs steady, her breathing calm. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was peace, finally earned. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city, breathing in sync with her quiet resolve. She realized closure isn't the end of a story. It's the moment you stop needing one. The days grew softer, quieter. No grand ending, no revenge left to chase. Elena Moreau began to feel the quiet rhythm of peace creeping back into her mornings. She'd stopped checking her phone, stopped wondering what Marcus Hale or Clara Voss were doing. Healing was no longer a performance, it was a routine. She found beauty in silence again, in the hum of a kettle, in pages turning without pain. The world hadn't changed, but her gaze had. She no longer looked for answers. She simply lived in the spaces where questions used to echo. The truth had hurt her once. Now, it humbled her. Marcus Hale called one last time. His voice, once so smooth, cracked under the weight of too many apologies. "I never meant to hurt you," he whispered. But even he didn't believe it anymore. Elena Moreau listened in silence, not out of forgiveness, but closure. "You didn't hurt me," she said softly. "You freed me." On the other end, the sound of his breathing, slow, defeated, echoed against her calm. She didn't hang up in anger. She simply let the line go quiet, the way you close a door that no longer leads anywhere worth returning to. Across the city, Clara Voss sat in her apartment, staring at the same ultrasound image that had broken the internet's silence. Her eyes were swollen, her hands trembling. She played Marcus Hale's old messages, empty, recycled promises, and realized she'd been chasing echoes of a man who never existed. When she finally deleted them, she felt something unfamiliar. Relief. The kind that comes from knowing the truth even when it burns. In that moment, both women, Elena and Clara, were connected by the same revelation. Love isn't destroyed by betrayal. It's reborn in the ruins of it. Weeks later, Elena Moreau stumbled upon the old recording, buried deep in her cloud backups, a ghost file named Voice One. For a moment, she hovered over the play icon, her pulse steady. Then curiosity overpowered fear. The laughter, the whisper, the deceit, it all sounded distant now, foreign. The voices that once defined her pain had lost their power. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She simply exhaled, smiled faintly, and deleted it once more, this time without hesitation. The sound of the deletion, one soft click, wasn't loss. It was freedom in digital form. There was no dramatic ending, no reckoning, only quiet. Elena Moreau walked along the same river where she'd once questioned everything, her steps unhurried, her reflection steady. The air was cool, the city silent except for the gentle rhythm of water against stone. She closed her eyes and heard nothing. Not his voice, not hers, just peace. The story that had begun with a lie ended with her silence. And for once, that was enough. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't vengeance at all. It's survival without bitterness. And the voice that once exposed everything now belonged only to memory.